Our next story is about Pakistan. A new national force is being created. Pakistan has announced the creation of a new national paramilitary force, the Federal Constabulary, but it has raised alarm among opposition leaders as well as rights groups. There are concerns that it could be used as a tool of political repression in Pakistan. Interior Minister Talal Chaudhary says that this force transforms the Frontier Constabulary, which is traditionally limited to Pakistan's northwest border, into a nationwide security force that will be tasked with internal security, riot control and counter-terrorism. It will be under the police, so that means greater scope of control. But here's the catch. It comes just days before ImranKhan's party plans major demonstrations on August 5th, marking 2 years since his arrest. Remember now, past demonstrations have turned violent, triggering a military deployment and further paralyzing Islamabad for days. PTI spokesperson Zulfikar Bukhari has warned that this move is a political tool and not a security upgrade. He says, and I'm quoting him here, "This should not be a gimmick to silence political opponents." But the timing of the move aside, this new force is not just about Imran Khan's supporters. Its jurisdiction will also now extend over Pakistan-occupied Kashmir as well as Gilgit-Baltistan. It means that the Pakistan state will now have a stronger hand over all these restive regions. Human Rights Commission Secretary Haris Khaliq has also raised red flags about this. He is alarmed at the lack of parliamentary debate over the creation of this new paramilitary force in Pakistan. He fears that civil rights will further suffer because of this move. And now, here's why this matters. Pakistan has a history of using paramilitaries as well as military courts to stifle dissent, to repress its citizens. Most notably after the 2023 demonstrations, when security forces were accused of firing on civilians, thousands were arrested, internet was shut down, and military courts handed out sentences, prompting widespread global condemnation from the US, UK and even the EU. Pakistan's powerful military establishment, led by Field Marshal Asim Munir, has been tightening its grip. Tensions between Munir and Imran Khan is what helped fuel unrest following Khan's ouster in 2022. And now, experts suggest that PTI street power could force the military's hand or provoke a broader crackdown if demonstrations turn violent. And they have, like in November 2024, when security forces invoked shoot-to-kill orders. There are fears the military could step in directly. Pakistan's return to military courts and paramilitaries for political cases threatens its fragile democratic framework. The question is, what to watch next in Pakistan? The August 5th demonstrations. Will the new force deploy aggressively? Or will the Pakistani Supreme Court or Parliament challenge the changes or stay silent? We'll have to wait and watch. Well, savouring pizzas or pastas with or without ketchup may soon burn a hole in the pockets of Americans. Why is that? As tomatoes grow in gardens or go in flames in kitchens, so will their prices, thanks to US President Donald Trump slapping Mexico with tariffs. Just days after renewing threat to impose a blanket import tax on Mexican goods, Trump has lived up to his words, imposing a 17% tariff on humble fresh tomatoes. Moreover, Trump had separately threatened to impose a 30% tariff on imports from Mexico starting August 1st, weeks after negotiations with a major US trading partner failed to reach any kind of a trade deal. US Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick said in a statement that this rule change is in line with Trump's trade policies and approach with Mexico. On the other hand, calling the US decision unfair, Mexico's government said that it would help local tomato manufacturers seek a deal with America, involving a suspension to the tomato duty as well as support them in seeking new markets. So what does all this mean for American shoppers and diners? Well, for starters, The levy could lead to a bump in tomatoes tagged prices at the supermarket, even as overall price rise. According to official figures, Mexico exported $3.3 billion of tomatoes last year, the vast majority of which is for the US. But the question is, what impact will this so-called tomato tax have overall? Even as consumers and businesses using Mexico-sourced tomatoes may feel the pinch, companies using tomatoes from the US may get a clean save. Ketchup brands like Heinz, which uses local ingredients, can keep serving its goods tariff-free, that is, but the real loss will be that of small businesses who rely on imported tomatoes for toppings and dressings, leaving them in a hot sauce. All right, in other news, the CIA has released bombshell new documents that reveal Lee Harvey Oswald was on their radar months before he assassinated former U.S. President John F. Kennedy in 1963. Washington Post reported that these new documents have been unearthed by a House task force. As per the report, documents show that CIA officer George Hernandez was leading the covert operations targeting anti-Castro Cuban exile groups. Now, these groups had direct contact with Oswald. The revelation adds fuel to the long simmering questions around what the agency knew about the assassination. The report says that Hernandez, who operated under the name Howard Mark Gabler, was responsible for infiltrating and influencing Cuban students' organizations opposed to Castro. One such group, known as the DRE, had multiple confrontations with Oswald, who publicly supported pro-Castro policies. Now, for decades, the CIA perhaps denied any connection to Oswald prior to the assassination. And Hernandez concealed his role during congressional investigations as well, in a bid to mislead the lawmakers and the public. And this cover-up raises serious questions about what the CIA knew and why it withheld this information for such a long period of time. These revelations come amid efforts initiated by the Trump administration, which ordered a full and complete release of all JFK assassination files. While thousands of documents have since been made public, major portions remain classified or heavily redacted. Although the newly declassified documents do not provide direct evidence implicating the CIA knew about the plot itself, they deepen suspicions about the agency's actions and suggest a broader effort to obscure the truth. Experts are now calling for the release of all remaining JFK files to finally shed light on one of America's most enduring and controversial mysteries till date. Odisha is on edge. Mass demonstrations have broken out after a 20-year-old college student in Balasore died by self-immolation. She had accused her professor of sexual harassment. Her death has united at least 8 political parties, including Congress and the CPIM. They have called for a state-wide bandh on July 17th, demanding justice. The student, a second-year B.Ed integrated co-student at Fakir Mohan Autonomous College, set herself on fire last week. She suffered 95% burns and died late Monday night at AIIMS, Bhubaneswar. Now, before taking this extreme step, she had pleaded for help. She had reportedly reached out to the college principal, the district collector, the local MP and MLA, Odisha's higher education minister and even the union education minister. But despite repeated complaints and pleas, the accused professor was given a clean chit by the college's internal complaints committee. Just a day before her self-immolation, in a statement, she alleged that the professor made sexual advances and threatened to fail her in exams if she resisted. Her death has sparked a political storm. Congress MP Rahul Gandhi has called it an organized murder. He blames the ruling party BJP for it, saying that the student was threatened, tormented and humiliated instead of receiving justice. BJP leaders also questioned the government's handling of the case. They criticized the timing of the post-mortem, which was done at 2 a.m., calling it an attempt to suppress facts and prevent public outrage. BJP leader Sulata Deo said that the party had met President Draupadi Murmu seeking her intervention, calling the incident shameful and a reflection of perhaps rising atrocities against women and tribals in Odisha. President Murmu also visited the student at AIIMS Bhubaneswar hours before her death, assuring a family of all help. Amid opposition blame, Odisha Chief Minister has vowed stringent action, promising the strictest punishment as per law against those found guilty.
She died around 11:45 p.m. I have met her family members. The doctors were trying their best to save her for the last 3 days. The government will take stringent action against those who are involved in this.
The Human Rights Commission has also raised concern over the state's education system and the failure to protect students from sexual harassment. This tragic death has not only exposed glaring gaps in institutional accountability, but it has also triggered a wider debate on women's safety on campuses. Well, former U.S. President Joe Biden's Autopen is in news again, and it turns out Biden is writing off claims made by the Republicans that he might have not been in charge of high-profile clemency decisions issued under his name at the end of his term, which had put the legitimacy of his pardon signatures under the scanner. In an interview with the New York Times, Biden had reportedly shed light on the use of his Autopen, and that's during the final hours of his presidency. Defending his use of the said Autopen, Biden clarified that he authorized his staff to use his Autopen on clemency warrants because of the sheer number of pardons. However, all of them were personally approved by him at the end of his term, all 25 of them between December 2024 and January 2025. According to the NYT report, the Autopen was used to sign off on several high-profile pardons, including those for prominent figures like Dr. Anthony Fauci and General Mark Milley. However, Biden reportedly made one exception where he signed the pardon by hand, that of his son, Hunter's, and the justification behind it was to shield family from the legal costs of fighting potential cases. And as we speak, Biden's Autopen usage is under investigation by the Department of Justice. Meanwhile, the White House, alongside the U.S. Congress too, is reportedly looking into the matter of Biden's use of Autopen. On Monday, during his meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte at the Oval Office, speaking to the reporters, the U.S. President Donald Trump said, and I quote here, that Biden knew nothing about what he was signing, unquote. He also reasserted the claim that Biden's use of the pen is a major scandal.
President Biden, of all people, spoke to the New York Times over the weekend. He did not speak to them on the record during his time in office at all, but he spoke to them recently. And he defended his use of the Autopen. But at the same time, the Times reports that he did not individually approve each name for the categorical pardons that applied to large numbers of people. What are your take on that? Any new revelations from that?
Well, I mean, you're talking about the Autopen. Look, the Autopen, I think, is maybe one of the biggest scandals that we've had in 50 to 100 years. This is a tremendous scandal.
Now, the Autopen, a signature duplicating device, has long been a flashpoint between the Republicans and the Democrats, with the former accusing the latter of inefficiency and inaction with regards to something as sensitive as pardons, a claim categorically rejected by the former U.S. President Joe Biden in the NYT interview. Not just that, Biden has reportedly also hit back at claims made by Republicans, such as his cognitive state may have impaired his functioning at work, calling them lies and speculations.